Hey guys, Corey, Faymus Media, and today we're looking at the 1DX Mark II. So the Canon 1DX Mark II is finally here, and it's got some really great features. We're going to talk about a couple of those. ISO range all the way up to 409,000, but it's not usable all the way to 409,000. You got the 1.62 million dot 3.2-inch screen, which is not quite as good as the Nikon, as that's a 2.36 million. Another thing is it's got touchscreen added, although it's not touchscreen all the way per se. It's only for focusing and for zooming in, and you have to actually touch a certain section of the screen to get it to work. It's not full touch screen like the D5. It also has dual Digic 6 processors. You can get 14 frames a second, 16 in live view with the mirror lock. It's a very fast camera. It is noticeably faster than the D5 in that aspect. It's a great camera, but still utilizing the same dynamic range and color space and color science that the 1DX and the 5D Mark II and 5D Mark III have. It's a great camera, but there are a couple of things about the camera that aren't good, and there's also a bunch that is good. So let's start with the good. The good is internal 4K, DCI 4K, 4096 by 2160. That is a really great thing. It also does 60 frames a second internally, which no other DSLR can do, which is absolutely fantastic. The camera is pretty darn good in low light, and it shoots fast, and the tracking is great. Now, where the problem lies and where the cons are with this camera is the back of the camera does not light up. I wish that we could get some illumination on the buttons to kind of see what we're doing in the dark, which you're not going to get. Only the back screen and the top screen are going to light up. That's a shortcoming of the camera. Another shortcoming is it's got a CFast and a CF card. Now that also is a good but also a bad thing. I like CF cards, but they're outdated technology. I made a sarcastic remark about CF cards and XQD in my previous review about the D500, but CFast is really the future for Canon, whereas XQD is the future for Nikon. The problem lies here is that when you want to shoot 4K video and you want to shoot 60p, you're going to have a CFast card. CF card's not going to cut it. You're going to get 8 seconds of recording. It's going to stop. You can record internal 4K at 24 or 30 frames a second if you have a really good CF card. If you got a Lexar or a SanDisk Extreme Pro, it'll actually say for video, it's guaranteed 65 megabytes per second write. That'll get you 4K at 30 frames, no problem. I haven't tested those with 60p yet, but I know for sure they work in 24 or 30p. The layout of the 1DX Mark II is pretty much untouched from the 1DX. There's a few little differences, like the grip and the overall feeling of the camera is just a little bit better, but it's very hard to tell. If you're not shooting on the 1DX currently or haven't been shooting on it, you really wouldn't know the difference by looking at them. This is a great camera. The eye cup seems to be a little cheap in comparison to the Nikon. So with the Canon 1DX Mark II, your ISO 100 all the way through 51,200, expandable 409,600. It is a little bit less light sensitive than the D5, but it's got its pluses over the D5. This is a great camera. Let's hit the streets, see what we can do. Like I said, this is going to be brilliant, 14 frames a second. There's nothing that we can do right now that's even going to come close to testing this camera. So as far as speed is concerned, let's really not try to outdo ourselves here. It's already wicked fast. Let you guys hear exactly what I'm talking about. This camera is just insane, to say the absolute least. Sounds like a machine gun. It truly does. The Canons were always faster than the Nikons. It's just the way it is. As you can see, there's the dual card slots. You got to put them in backwards. CF on the left, CFast on the right. So the 1DX Mark II will do 170 frames continuous burst, but only on CFast. whereas the Nikon will do 200. It'll shoot forever until your finger gets sore or you get bored and you get tired of taking pictures. That's due to the XQD. Now, granted, 170 frames is more than most people will need, especially for weddings or any type of normal day's worth of work. Unless, of course, you're doing wildlife, then it may mean something. But you're gonna have one CF card and one CFast. As long as you're okay with that, the 1DX Mark II is splendid. I shot a wedding this morning and I was using the 1DX Mark II for video and photo all morning. It's absolutely a gem to use. The colors are great. I always loved Canon's color science, although I lean more towards Nikon when it comes to dynamic range. That's a discussion for another video, which is the 1DX Mark II versus the D5, which we're filming today. So I'm gonna be discussing that when we're done filming this. But let's hit the streets and let's start shooting with Canon's new 1DX Mark II. So we got it set up with a 24-105. Just note that one of the things a Nikon shooter had asked me a long time ago is, and I've thought the same thing before too, how do you change from servo to single focus shooting like you do on the Nikon? On the Nikon, you just press the side button, but there is no side button here to control the autofocusing on the Canon. But I have programmed the front custom button to change back and forth. So in the menu, you can change it, so you can just hit this button on the front of the camera and it'll go between servo or one shot. So that makes it really quick, and you can still adjust your autofocusing points with the D-pad on the back, or a little joystick, whatever you want to call it. But let's start shooting. The 1DX Mark II is a phenomenal camera. I'm trying to decide if I want to buy the D5 or the 1DX Mark II for myself. I shoot a lot of photo and video, and a lot of my film lenses are Canon, so I may pick up the 1DX Mark II myself, but we're gonna see how she does right here on the streets. The tracking is really good. 61 autofocus points are brilliant. Switching over to servo function. One of the things I didn't talk about is the silent mode. Here is regular shutter. And then if you're shooting a wedding, like I do a lot of weddings, it actually has silent mode. Listen how quiet this is. You can barely hear it. The Nikon does have that as well, but the 1DX Mark II is really quiet in silent mode, very quiet. It's great to have at a wedding. I can tell you from experience this morning at the wedding that I filmed, this is great to have with silent shutter when you're taking pictures and you don't want to disturb the ceremony. You also have your quick menu in the back, which is the Q button. You can change your picture styles. In natural light, Canon's color science is beautiful. With the 5D Mark IV coming to me this week, we're going to be reviewing that next Saturday or Sunday. It's going to be great to compare that to the 1DX Mark II and see what features they're going to have in that camera. So with the 5D Mark IV coming next week to me, we're going to be filming it on Sunday. We're going to see how the features compare to the 1DX Mark II. The 1DX Mark II, they left out Canon C-Log, which makes me believe they're trying to push the film industry and film shooters over to the 1DC and the 1DC Mark II, which is coming soon. The metering on the camera is brilliant. Negative or plus 5 EV on the meter. Tracking in this camera is very easy. You can adjust your servo functions in the servo menu to track radical moving subjects, cars, cyclists. You can adjust the sensitivity of the tracking. Very customizable. You can display all your autofocusing points on the screen, or you can just have it show the individual focus points. I'm going to track the cyclist here. Let's see if it's on point. We're filming in the same area that we were with the Nikon D5 video. And we're back again. I always love Union Square. And 20 megapixels is absolutely plenty. for shooting sports, wildlife, weddings. In fact, I personally know a few wedding shooters who have a 5DSR and a 5DS, and they actually purposefully put the camera in small or medium RAW. So in reality, anything between 18 or 16 even and 20 megapixels is plenty for shooting almost everything. The 1DX Mark II just feels very comfortable in the hands. To be honest, I'm not biased with any cameras or any camera companies. I don't work for any of the companies. I work for myself and to help you guys to be as honest as I can to tell you what's good and what's not and what impresses me. And I shoot on Nikon because that's where I, jumped to quite a few years ago. But the Canon 1DX Mark II really does feel great in the hands. It's a very balanced camera, and I love it. One of the features that I wish the 1DX Mark II had was 4K via HDMI. It does not. You're locked at 1080. They're trying to block you out of any real film production in this camera due to their cinema lineup, whereas the Nikon D5 will do 4K out. Now, I just wish the 1DX Mark II had a full touchscreen. In reality, you can only touch to focus or touch to zoom by actually tapping the magnifying glass on the screen. You can't swipe through images or pinch to zoom. I really wish you could. We're up to ISO 320 here. Nowhere near the usable limit for this camera. Tracking's great. Servo functions are fantastic. Moving the autofocus points around is spectacular. It's easy. Tracking subjects that are walking, very easy for the camera. It's really not hard for the 1DX to track. And customizing my focus points is very easy with the quick menu button. Now, when shooting this camera vertically, it's quite comfortable. In fact, one of the most comfortable cameras I've ever held while shooting vertical. Focus is definitely really snappy. Look at this, Ray, they're cutting trees down. Pile of trees over here, pile of trash yet again here. This trash has been here since last week. They haven't even cleaned it up since we did the Nikon D5 video. This is insane. It's starting to smell like the video game The Division already. Switching over to one shot really quickly. The metering is fantastic on the 1DX Mark II. You can also control your autofocusing with the AF on button on your thumb or a half press of the shutter, just like all the other Canons. I really like the tracking on it. It's great. It's not as busy here this time of the day as it was last week. Doesn't seem like there's as much stuff going on. Really makes shooting on the streets easy. Professional wildlife and sports camera with extremely fast shooting right here on the streets makes tracking people a very simple task, to say the least. Kind of have to walk the streets a little bit. because if we don't, we'll get run over by all the people on the sidewalks. Or we can get run over by all the cars and buses on the street. We're right between two trucks. The colors, if you're shooting Canon, Canon has that look. It doesn't look like a Nikon does or a Sony. It has that look. So let's switch over to video by just switching the button over on the top. We're in live view. Let's get the shutter down to 50 because we're shooting 24p. Get the ISO down to 100. Now, your quick menu here, I'm in full HD. We want to go over to the menu and we're going to enable 4K. Right here, 24p motion JPEG, then we'll do some slow motion. You can also enable 24p. So that's a really great function to have. You can also hit your quick menu here and change different settings. You can even go all the way over to your white balance, which I'm going to set to auto. Picture profile is next. I'm going to set it over to CineStyle. As you can see, there's a standard one, or faithful versus the flat, so it's not crushing the shadows as much. When you hit your quick menu, you can also keep hitting up to go over to your headphone volume or your microphone. You can just turn the dial to adjust while you're recording, which is really great. So we got it all set up here. Start recording, we're in 4K. Looks fantastic. 4K truly looks magnificent on this camera. Motion JPEG, gonna have great dynamic range. With the CineStyle from Technicolor, it's really, really flat picture profile. Gonna have some decent latitude in post. I recommend shooting an ISO 160, 320, 640, 1250. That's the recommended settings I would use. It's what I've used since the 7D. 70 Mark II, 5D Mark II, 5D Mark III, everything. I always shoot 160, 320, 640, 1250. It has a little bit different of a look than 100 and 200. It tends to crush the shadows, whereas 160, 320 tends to not crush the shadows so much. And when you're shooting with a flat picture profile, it's critical. So you're shooting a flat picture profile like the Technicolor CineStyle, and you shoot 160, 320, 640. You're trying to preserve as much detail in the shadows as you can, so you can shoot a little darker to get the sky to be exposed properly, and you're not going to lose as much detail in the shadows. While you're shooting, you can hit the info button to display the different parameters on the screen. I'm going to crank the ISO to 320, and then we'll do some 60p for as long as we can on this CF card. So the Canon 1DX Mark II is phenomenal for video. It's almost worth the price in itself just for shooting video. If you're shooting professional photos, it's just as great of a camera, especially if you're already shooting Canon. But I would even think about buying this for myself just for the video features. Then again, the 1DC Mark II will come out, and it'll be 3 times the price and shoot better video. But for the price, you can't go wrong with this camera. You really can't. The 1DX Mark II is just, it's worth it just for video alone. DCI 4K internally. Get you a 256 gigabyte CFast card and a 256 gigabyte CF card, and the fastest ones you can get, and go to town. So how is the full HD on the 1DX? Well, before we shoot slow motion, I figure I'll tell you, it's pretty good. It's not as soft as some people say it is, but it's not as great as it should be. Then again, you're shooting full frame sensor, and you're getting pixel binning, obviously, because you're not going to get a native 1080p resolution from a full frame sensor. It's over 3 times the size of what 1080p really is. So you're going to get a little bit of pixel binning and a little bit of softness, but it's not as bad as some people say it is. Granted, the Nikon D5's 1080p is slightly sharper and slightly better, but this camera is definitely not heavily flawed in HD. You get the 1.5 crop in 4K, which is what you want, because that's going to be the native size of the sensor that you're going to want to use for 4K, especially DCI, so you're using the appropriate amount of the sensor. That's why 4K footage on the 1DX Mark II is absolutely stunning. Doesn't matter what you throw at this camera, it'll take it. This camera will take the abuse. It's rugged magnesium alloy body. I could just drop it right here. Ray would kill me that I dropped this 24-70 f2.8, but the 1DX Mark II is very, very rugged and tough and comfortable. You hit someone in the head with it, you'd probably kill them. If you drop this on the floor, it's going to put a hole in the floor. It's a very solid camera. Focus is fast, good metering, good video, good photo. The 1DX Mark II is probably the greatest camera Canon's ever released, next to the 5DSR. I'm a really big fan of the 5DSR for photography, for weddings, doing amazing outdoor portraiture. But if you're shooting on Canon and you want wedding and video, the 1DX Mark II is it. To be able to have 4K at 60p internal is absolutely phenomenal. Of course, it's going to stop recording on me because I only have a CF card in here, not a CFast, but I can record just enough so you guys have an idea of what the 60p footage looks like. It also does full HD at 120 frames a second. Let's actually test that out right now. What you're going to do is just basically go into your movie recording settings, and you're going to pick full HD at all I, and you're going to go to enable high frame rate in the menu, and then you're going to hit enable, and it's going to give you 119 frames a second at all I, which is the highest quality 1080p you can get. And here we go. Now I'm going to take the shutter to 250 so I can get double. Rule of thumb is double the shutter of whatever your frames per second are. The 1DX Mark II is very good in low light, so we're going to be able to get away with 3200 with very little issue. This bumped it to 4000. And you won't drop frames at high frame rate and full HD on a CF card. You only need the CFast card if you're shooting 170 frames of raw burst or 4K in 60. But other than getting 60 frames in 4K or getting a full 170 burst of raw photos, a fast CF card will do everything else. Touch to focus is brilliant. I love it. It's just great. I love the 1DX Mark II. It's just brilliant, just brilliant. For video, it's hands down the best DSLR for video, period. Unless you're shooting on a 1DC. But if you take out Canon's cinema lineup, and we're talking just photo DSLRs, the 1DX Mark II is the best DSLR for video, period. It is phenomenal.
Now we're going to go ahead and test the 1DX Mark II in low light. Anything below 3200 ISO is kind of a waste of time, but we're going to do it anyway. The 1DX Mark II is noticeably better than the original 1DX in low light, and you'll notice even at 1600 or even 3200 ISO, there's practically no noise at all. The image looks great. Even when we move along to 6400 ISO, there's very small trace amounts of noise and grain in the shadows, but the colors stay true. 12,800, a little bit more noise, but still a very usable image. The colors are starting to degrade slightly. By 25,600, you're going to need some noise reduction, and the colors are degrading even further. 51,200 is about the brink of usability here, so be careful when you approach this number. 102,400, there's not much you can do to save this image. The noise is getting prominently worse, and by 204,800, it looks worse than a cell phone from 10 years ago, and 409,600 looks like sandpaper. It's killing my eyes. Oh my God. Moving along, we're going to test out the DCI 4K internally at ISO 800. It looks spectacular. There is no noise whatsoever. That's to be expected. Even at 1600 ISO, there is no noise whatsoever. 3200 ISO, you start to see some filmic type grain dancing around in the shadows, but it's still very pleasing. Even at ISO 6400, this image is totally usable. We're going to move along to 12,800, which is the limit for shooting 4K, but even the noise at 12,800 looks filmic and very pleasing. Now let's go ahead and test out HD All-Eye 1080p at 800 ISO. Image looks spotless. Even at 1600 ISO, zero noise whatsoever. And then we're going to move along to ISO 3200, and you're going to see the image is definitely softer than 4K, but that's to be expected as it's full frame shooting 1080p. Moving along to 6400 ISO, there's still very small amounts of noise in the shadows, very hard to detect. You don't really start noticing it prominently until 12,800, but still a very usable image. This camera performs well in low light while in full frame 1080p. 25,600, still very usable image, but the noise is becoming more noticeable. Now let's take a look at the 4K against the HD 1080p All-Eye. 4K on the left, HD on the right, ISO 800, they look about neck and neck. Moving along to ISO 1600, they still look about neck and neck, although Motion JPEG gives the DCI 4K a much sharper image. Moving along to 3200 ISO, you can see that the 4K is a little bit more noisy, but it's still more pleasing due to a filmic look, while as the HD is more macro blocked and softer, which is typical in DSLRs. ISO 6400, same thing. HD is still better in low light, less noise, more pleasing on the 4K though. Even 12,800, the filmic type grain in 4K still is more pleasing than HD, even though not as good technically in low light. 1080p will go up to 25,600. 4K will not, so it wins only because it can shoot that high. Moving along, let's test the 1DX Mark II against the 5D Mark IV ISO 800. They look to be about neck and neck. The 5D Mark IV seems just a little bit sharper, but that could just be due to me not quite focusing. The same on both, so I apologize. ISO 1600, they're about the same. And then we're going to go ahead and move along to ISO 3200. You're going to see they're pretty much neck and neck. Even the color correction is almost identical. Canon has done a really good job of keeping these cameras pretty much the same. ISO 6400 is pretty much the exact same thing. They are identical. 12,800, looking at both cameras, the 1DX Mark II is slightly cleaner, but pretty much neck and neck. The 1DX Mark II is leaps and bounds beyond the original 1DX. Mostly because of the fact that the video is internal 4K DCI up to 60 frames a second and full HD All-Eye, which is the highest quality you're ever going to get on a DSLR, up to 120 frames a second. But that kind of overshadows the fact that the low-light performance on the 1DX Mark II is noticeably better than the original 1DX. Better metering, better autofocusing capabilities, dual pixel CMOS sensor for phase detection autofocusing while in live view, especially while shooting video, and the battery is slightly improved. Not to mention, the 1DX Mark II will do 14 frames a second, which is 2 more than the previous 1DX. It has 1.62 million dot rear display versus the 1 million of the original 1DX, and has built-in GPS. Not only is the 1DX Mark II the best DSLR Canon has to offer for photographers or videographers, this camera is truly amazing. And the 1DX Mark II is not only the best DSLR that Canon has in their lineup right now, but is the best DSLR for video on the planet today.
So the 1DX Mark II is really amazing. And what it's really amazing for is video. It's a great photographer's camera. In fact, it's a brilliant photographer's camera, but video is plain astonishing. It's mind-blowing. The camera is just foolish and reckless. That's how good it is in video. It just gives you all these features you'd never expect from a DSLR. It does internal 4K at 60 frames a second and 120 frames a second in all-eye, that's right, all-eye 1080p full HD. The camera truly is great. I just wish they did a 2x crop for 1080, which would give you a little bit sharper of an image, but you can always color correct and add a little bit of post-production sharpening. It's really not that bad. The full HD is pretty good, nowhere near as sharp as 4K, obviously, but it is pretty good. The one thing that I did not mention in the video that I just remembered right now is you can pull stills. How could I forget that? You can pull 8.8 megapixel stills from only 4K footage. It's absolutely amazing. You basically just go into the video you took and hit the info button, which is up by the viewfinder, and you're just basically going to go to your options, and I can show you how to do that. What you're basically going to do is you're going to hit your play button, and right here is the 1080p footage. We're going to go back to 4K, and to make sure you have your info on so you know which footage you're looking for, and all the information you could possibly ever need is right there. But my 4K footage that I'm going to take a still from is right here. What I'm going to do is hit the set button. Then I'm going to move with the D-pad over to frame grab and hit set, hit OK, and then I can view the extracted still image, and that's the still image from the 4K. We can go ahead and do that one more time so you guys can get a better idea. We're actually going to play this. We're going to hit play, and we're going to pause right here. You're going to go over and grab the still. Done. Now you've got that as your still. So you can grab stills at 8.8 megapixels, so that's amazing. No other DSLR can do that. It's absolutely astonishing that this camera has these kind of features. You'd never expect a DSLR to come so heavily packed with the goodness. In fact, bringing it down a notch and just being 100% honest with you, if this camera had 4K out on HDMI and it had Canon C-Log, this would destroy every DSLR on the planet. Realistically, those two missing features would make it so you wouldn't have to buy anything Canon had in the C lineup or anything Nikon had to offer. And in fact, all Nikon shooters would probably jump ship if this had 4K external via HDMI out and had Canon C-Log. It's that damn good of a camera. It literally is. The fact that they left the C-Log out and the HDMI 4K out only brings the camera down to earth. It brings it back down to earth with its big ego. The camera is brilliant. If you shoot video and you're a Canon user, this is the camera for you. Forget the 5D Mark III, forget the 5D Mark II, forget the 7D Mark II, forget the 5DSR, and forget the original 1DX. If you can't afford a 1DC or a 1DC Mark II, which is coming out soon, this is the camera to get for Canon. And if you shoot photography as well, you're sold. This is the camera you need to buy. Now, if you're a Nikon shooter and you're strictly shooting video, you will want to consider jumping ship for the video features of this camera. It's absolutely brilliant. I love it. It feels great in the hands. Could never be happier with 4K internal and especially motion JPEG wrapped in a QuickTime movie format, because motion JPEG is going to edit better as it's shooting 24 JPEGs in a row, and you're going to get a little bit more latitude out of a JPEG as you would H.264. So it's brilliant. It really truly is. So hopefully you found this review helpful. of the 1DX Mark II. It's finally here. It's fantastic. You guys should really rent it and shoot on it or buy it if you're looking to get a new camera from Canon. It truly is amazing. I've got the Canon 1DX Mark II video I'm filming tonight versus the D5. That's right, the big head-to-head video. I'm filming that tonight as well. So if you're watching this video, chances are the 1DX Mark II versus Nikon D5 video is already out or on its way uploading to YouTube. If you really want to support the channel, guys, please support the channel by subscribing and, of course, purchasing any of the gear we review in the links below. It keeps the channel coming. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter, faymusmedia.com/blog. It's on the right-hand side of the screen. You can also go to my Facebook page, facebook.com/famousmedia. And on the left-hand side, you can sign up for the blog. And also facebook.com/groups/happy shooting photo. I also need beta testers for the forum boards. Be sure to email me, Corey@faymusmedia.com. So don't forget to subscribe and to purchase any of the gear we're reviewing to support the channel and keep the reviews coming. Please use the links in the information box below on YouTube. Please use those links to support the channel and keep the reviews coming. Once again, subscribe and happy shooting. Oh, and by the way, I'm gonna stick around here for a little bit and have some fun with the 1DX Mark II.